Pour yourself a cold one.
Let's drink them, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it is Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. You can Google it, or if you're watching us on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Just check out the helmets and the game balls and stuff. I did not buy them off Fanatics. They actually gave them to me. Actually, I take that back. I had to pay $300 for the Cowboys helmet, even though I started 7 games for them. It's a whole other story for another day. The point is, I got a lot of podcasts, and this is the one that everyone needs to be listening to or watching right now, because we are about 2 months away from one of my favorite events of the year, the 2022 NFL Draft. Hit me up on social media, always at Ross Tucker NFL, at Ross Tucker Pod. For those of you that want to watch, it's youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. So fired up for today's show for 2 reasons. One is we're going to actually dive into the process. Where do you start? How do you know which guys to actually check out and evaluate? And then how do you go about your evaluation process? That's one thing I love about it. But I'm not just doing it with Emory Hunt, my co-host at FBall Game Plan, who's a total rock star. We're bringing on a guy I'm a huge fan of on social media, what he does with the draft profiles. He is Chad Reuter from NFL Media. He's a researcher. He's an analyst. You need to check him out on Twitter at Chad_Reuter, REUTER. And it looks like he lives in Wisconsin, which is amazing, because if you said to me, Ross, you have 100 guesses what state Chad lives in, I would look at Chad and be like, probably Wisconsin. Boom, nailed it. He lives in Wisconsin. I love it. Chad, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, you bet. I appreciate you having me on.
So here's what's cool. Emory, one of the reasons why I love Emory is because Emory is not just about the top 50 prospects that you can hear about everywhere else over and over and over again. Emory dives deep, man. And maybe it's just because I played FCS, whatever. But he knows D2, D3. Chad, you might be the white Emory Hunt. You might be the white Emory Hunt. You might be the guy that actually – because I'll be doing like an FCS championship game, and Chad will be like, ooh, good matchup between this guy and this guy. And, like, you're into it too, Chad. I don't know how you guys divvied up over NFL.com, but why are you so invested in the off-the-radar guys or the smaller school guys as well?
Well, it comes from where I started. I started a website 20 plus years ago, and I went into all the prospects, and I focused a lot on small school prospects at that time. My first year of analyzing the draft was also known as the Ross Tucker draft of 2001. So, starting in the beginning, I got to know a lot of those guys. And then, one of my key roles with NFL Media is putting together all the information that is used during the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Game, and now we're doing NFLPA Game, the HBCU Legacy. And so you're getting players from all over the country at all different levels. So you need to be aware of, a lot of the guys at that level, not just because they're in these games, because they're good players and they deserve a shot. And that's one of the great things about the draft is some of these guys that, didn't get very many scholarship offers, et cetera, they're getting their shot. And so I've really done that since the beginning. And as time goes on, you focus more on the FBS guys because they're the guys that are most likely. But you have to keep an eye on some of these other guys. And it's a fun part of the process.
So I'm so glad you said that. I want to start there, I guess. I should have done a better introduction in the sense that, can you tell us exactly what, like, I just know that you know all about the prospects and that you do draft stuff for NFL.com. I guess I don't even really know, Chad, exactly what your role is at NFL Media.
Well, the thing is, I'm not an on TV guy, so I'm a little bit under, behind the scenes kind of guy. I do a lot of the research on these players. When you watch the NFL draft, a lot of people either have, now they have an iPad or something in front of them that they're looking through as the draft goes on, especially on day 3 to find out, who these guys are and what they're doing. A lot of the data that they're looking at is stuff that I've put together over the course of the year. So I'm a researcher in that sense. And then when they want somebody foolish enough who's interested in doing 3-round mock drafts, 7-round mock drafts, they say, hey, Chad, why don't you do that? Because, none of the rest of us really want to do that. So it's up to you. And I have a lot of fun doing those too, because they're basically just big puzzles. And, people are into Wordle, Quirtle, all that stuff. The draft, the mock draft, 7-round mock drafts, like a 256 Wordle, right? And so I get to do a lot of that stuff as well. This last year, I was asked to write about the top 25 Senior Bowl prospects every couple of weeks and name some other guys that are kind of at the top of the draft. So I get to do a little bit of everything with NFL media, which is fantastic.
So when they do like the stump the truck thing on the 3rd day,
yes,
you're like the truck. Like you're the guy that tries to have some information on any guy that could potentially get drafted, right?
Yeah, when they do that when they do that bit during the draft, I'm like really paying attention, because I'm like, okay, guys, I told you about that guy. Okay, I told you about that guy. On occasion, I'll put it on the list. It doesn't make it, whatever. But they do a great job of whatever I do. The guys that are in the truck do like 10 times more work in terms of getting video on the guys and making sure that stuff is ready to go at a moment's notice. So that's the really fun part of the draft for me.
So all of these, Emory, are all reasons why you like Chad, right? Like before you even came on, Chad, Emory was like, oh, Chad's one of the best, because he's like, you're speaking Emory's language, right, Emory?
Yeah, and it's one of my pet peeves when you talk about the draft or when you talk with someone is like, oh man, this guy from Ohio State can really play. Like, yeah, it's funny because he probably was a 5-star, going to a major school. Of course he can play. So that's easy. That's the layup. I feel like a lot of people around the draft community are running around here just hitting layups. While when you really want to be Steph Curry, really want to expand your range is to start hitting from half court, start hitting from the other side of the court as well. And that's where Chad comes in. That's where I come in as well. As you realize the draft is bigger than 50 players. You realize the draft is bigger than 7 rounds, and you realize football is bigger than the NFL. So when you are jumping into this side of the business, the draft side of the business, is all about scouting talent, and you'll scout talent anywhere. So if you can scout talent at a game between Fairleigh Dickinson and Lycoming, you can scout a game between Ohio State and Penn State. So give me the small school guy, because that really trains your eye for scouting, because anyone can pick the Ohio State wide receiver that runs fast and catches deep balls, in their sleep. So give me the guy that really shows that you can do the work. And that's why I really respect and like what Chad does.
Hey, breaking news, by the way. Evan Neal, the offensive lineman for Alabama, he's a big kid with good feet. He's a good prospect.
Yeah, right. Right. Well, it's interesting you guys mentioned that, because sometimes those guys that go to Ohio State, that can almost push them higher than they should. I mean, you have to be careful about what I found, not only that, where you kind of overestimate a guy's ability based on where he plays, but also you have to pay attention to the guys that maybe don't get as much credit at those larger schools, right? Like Terry McLaurin would be a perfect example. As a guy goes in the 3rd round, and I'm not sure why, other than he was kind of a 1-year guy at Ohio State. And so there can be some, there's some movement along that spectrum, even among guys at the top programs, which makes it interesting. I mean, I think that means you just don't watch Evan Neal. You pay attention to Jalen Moody, when you're watching Alabama, guys like that can really kind of become something, even though they may not have been, All-Americans.
I'm sure I'm biased on this, and I think the people I've talked to will say to you, or they'll say to me, yeah, Ross, but you're forgetting how many of those guys never make it.
Yeah.
And I understand that we all want to make informed decisions. And the better the competition level the guy played at, the better, the more information you probably have on him. Like, I get that
Right.
part. But the thing I've said is I feel like if you look at FCS guys, especially, even D2, they're consistently drafted lower than they really should go, or then
Yes.
they end up performing. I will say this, though. It seems like the last few years, it's gotten better. Like, even this year, there's a Northern Iowa offensive lineman. Like, a couple, like 5-10 years ago, Emory, no matter how good he was, he's not going higher than the third round. Like, something has changed in the last couple of years, because there used to be like, I don't care how good the FCS guy is, he's not going round 1 or round 2. It feels like maybe some of these teams, Emory, that's changing a little bit.
Yeah, you know what it is too. I think it's two big reasons. One, just from a 10,000-foot level, the games between FCS and FBS have become much more competitive. You're seeing more upsets, and it's really proven that the top tier FCS and Group of Five is really one and the same. Like, if you look at the Southland Conference and the Sun Belt Conference, you're essentially looking at the same teams because they're recruiting the same talent. And the second reason, when you look at FCS prospects, a lot of these coaching staffs are in place for an entire career for these players. So they're getting the same message, the same type of coaching. They're developing at a faster rate, and guys are staying 4 and 5 years. So they're developing their bodies, developing their game, they're developing their nuance more so than, let's say, an FCS guy that gets in at a Power 5 level, raw athleticism, playmaking ability. He's getting on the field faster and may not be getting the same development as an FCS guy. I think that's why you're seeing a more polished small college prospect come out than we've seen in years previous.
Yeah, and I think we have to remember too, colleges are sort of the they kind of sift through a lot of these high school players, right? And then that sifting process does allow the more athletic players, maybe the more polished players at bigger high school programs to end up at the FCS or at the FBS level. So there is a difference between the average player at the FBS level and the average player at the FCS level. So some of that still goes on. They do kind of wade through the players before the NFL even looks at them. So there's some of that. But I agree, Emory, that all the things you said are true. And it's interesting. A while back, I did a study on that, and I looked, and you're exactly right, Ross. It was players in the FCS and lower divisions were picked on average 1 round later than they should have been, based on what they showed in the NFL. And I think that gap is closing a little bit. I think it's still there at some level, but like you said, if a guy has traits, athleticism, all that stuff, they don't care where you play. That's why like the Senior Bowl has become so important for these guys, and Shrine Game and all the other All-Star games. They give these guys an opportunity to show that their traits do translate against FBS players. And the Senior Bowl didn't really do that much before Phil Savage took over and now Jim Nagy takes it, but now they do it. They go and get guys like that so they can show their stuff. And that's really important to their draft prospects.
Like, I'll give you guys a couple examples. And they're both from South Carolina State.
Yeah.
Javon Hargrave. What round did he go in?
3rd.
Yeah. I mean, come on, dude.
Yeah.
And he even went to the Senior Bowl and did well, right?
Right, exactly.
But Javon like, that guy is a first-round pick all day when you look at his body and his explosion. Darius Leonard ended up going, what, round 2?
Round 2, yep.
And was he a Senior Bowl guy?
I don't remember, but I think he was, right?
Yeah, I interviewed him at the Senior Bowl.
But that's another one. Like, that guy's a first-round pick. You know what I mean? If he goes, I'm actually surprised Darius went in the 2nd round, Hargrave went in the 3rd round. Because 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that's not even happening.
Yeah, and that's more of a position thing, I think, too. Like, if you're not stack linebackers don't necessarily go in the 1st round as much, as they probably once did, and that's part of it. And then Hargrave, if you look at him and you don't think he's a pass rusher on the interior, he's not going to go as high. So, despite at their position, like what teams consider premium positions, They went pretty high, and you're right. They went pretty high for where they came from and the position they played. But you're also right in that if, like for example, Travis Jones from UConn could end up being like a second round pick this year, and Hargrave was probably a better. I mean, his film was better, definitely when he was in college. So he probably deserved to go in that same range.
And it's funny because when you think about scouting, it's a little bit regional based too and biased. So FCS player coming from the South probably gets a little bit more, leeway than someone coming
Yeah.
from the North. Case in point, you're in Wisconsin. Someone will see a receiver from Wisconsin Whitewater and say, "Oh, he's a Division III kid." Well, he's probably an FCS kid, but there's no FCS programs in Wisconsin.
Right.
You
Right.
probably have a ton of talented D3 guys there, a ton of talented D2 guys in Minnesota because there's no FCS program. So,
Right.
so those type of stereotypes based off where guys are located also kind of filters through the scouting process.
Quinn Miners should have been a second round pick last year, but he was a third round pick, and they drafted him as a center for some reason. I mean, I understand why they did, but like he's a guard and he's a starting guard all day. He should have went in the second round, and Denver got a bargain when he was still there in the third.
Before we get to your process, because I am curious about it, like how you guys know where to start, I want to make sure everyone is taking athletic greens like I am, because it's like cold and flu season. Drink your veggies. 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods. Look, if you see my social media at Ross Tucker NFL, and you see how many IPAs I drink or what I eat when I go out, you know I need athletic greens in my life. It's like a multivitamin, but it's all your veggies. Costs you less than $3 a day. I was with people this weekend at a ski weekend in Montana. They're like, "Oh yeah, we take athletic greens every day." Both the husband and wife. I didn't even know about this until I started advertising for them. Now everybody I talk to evidently takes it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/draft. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/draft to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right. So here's my question. Where do you start? Emery, I'll start with you. You have like a million names. Your scouting guide's amazing. Chad's doing 7-round mock drafts out here. I want to know where you start. Like the 2022 NFL draft, where did you like? I mean, I know you're not just scouring like NAIA rosters and be like, "Yeah, this guy might be good." Like you have to hear about these guys somehow.
It's a 3-part process. One, you start because my process starts in January once the All-Star game circuit starts. Because during the season, I'm doing NFL stuff and calling college games, right? So if I'm calling a college game, I may make a note of a guy that I watched or a guy that stood out in the game that I called, and earmark. Usually a small college guy, because again, the Power 5 FBS guys, they'll show themselves eventually, right? So starting in January, I just go with the All-Star game rosters, and not just the Senior Bowl, but you go all the way to the FCS Bowl in December, College Ground Showcase, Tropical Bowl, so on and so forth. So you get all the All-Star game roster because, like Chad talked about, with the high school recruiting, it filters out top guys, right? So you start there, and then I'll move on from that list, which is you 9 All-Star games in. So you move from that list to guys that have declared early. So you get those guys out the way as well, and then you work yourself to guys that weren't in all-star games, but are some of the guys that are senior prospects that probably should get a look. And some of the guys that you go back and that you earmarked during that time. So that way I get all of my guys done in that way. I know there are going to be some stragglers that are going to be at pro days and things of that nature. You make those a separate note and just include a separate report. Case in point, I remember being at the Jets facility for Rutgers pro day, and they had Gus Edwards working out there, and I was like, "Oh, this guy Gus Edwards, played at Miami, played at Rutgers. He looks good athletically. He checks all these boxes. He had a really good day." And then he goes on and gets picked up by the Ravens and becomes the Gus Edwards that we know. So that's someone that you see at a pro day, but you still get a report on. But the grades and things of that nature are all done based off the All-Star game rosters, and then junior declarations, and then the guys that you earmark, seniors, the FCS, and all that stuff, so on and so forth.
Yeah, but Emory, you say that, but all season you're always bringing up small school guys. Like the whole season when we talk about the big matchups, you always pick like one small school game, and you already know a lot of these guys. My point is, my question: how do you already know about these guys the whole season?
Well, I'm immersed in that life based off the games that I broadcast, and I do an FCS show on television. So I'm breaking down these games from who's going to win, who's going to lose, and what's the key matchup, and then you say, okay, wow, this guy is a senior, has been highly productive. You kind of highlight him in the report to circle back at the end of the season if he gets into one of these smaller all-star games. If not, this guy. Case in point, Menashe Bailey was someone that I earmarked from Morgan State when I was calling the game. So I'm like, man, this dude is explosive, top tier athleticism, but he ended up getting to the Tropical Bowl. Same with I forget his name, the offensive lineman from Morgan State that got drafted by the Cardinals. Joshua, I forget his last name, but Miles. And so that's someone. I remember they played Towson. So okay, here's someone that can play. Let me earmark him. I didn't even know he was on the radar until he popped up on the Shrine Bowl roster at the end. So I was like, wow, I thought that was someone that, so you kind of, in terms of breaking down games, doing previews, you get to know players, you get familiar with players. And mainly when I'm at these colleges visiting coaches and doing interviews, I'm always getting extra information like, hey man, who's some of the guys I should watch out for next season or at the end of the season that you think has an NFL shot?
How about you, Chad?
Well, as I was talking about what my role is with NFL media, I should have said I'm basically the advanced scout because I start on the next year's draft in April. Like before the current draft is done, I'll be working on the next draft because I need to provide information to the other guys, to DJ, Lance Zierlein. I mean, a lot of these other guys that I work with, I'm kind of the guy that gets names on the radar for people because during the summer, I'm studying these guys. If you follow me on Twitter, you see that I do a Snap Scout series the last couple of years where I'm looking at late and mid-round picks for the next draft in June. Because I got to know these guys so I know who to write about and to provide that research to the other guys with NFL media. So I start it's a 12-month process. Feels like 12 years sometimes, but 12-month process where I get to know these guys. I'm looking at all conference teams. I'm looking at any website that I can find information on. I'm looking at when Phil Steele's magazine comes out. You bet I'm checking that out. Any place that I can find information on guys at any level that makes sense in terms of their size, I look at the NCAA statistics for the year for Division III, Division II, FCS, all of that to see if there's guys that are highly productive, that have good size. And then I look at the film and I say, does the film match up with what an NFL team would expect for a guy? So I'm kind of going through that whole process during the summer. And then researching these guys, putting together a lot of the information on these guys during the summer. Because if I waited until December or January to start this process, I would be overwhelmed. I put together information on over 1,000 players this year. And some of those guys were carried over from last year because of COVID. But, I have to have a lot of information there because now with all the All-Star games that are out there, you're talking about like 600 guys that you need to know about. And that's not even including underclassmen. So, a lot of underclassmen. So I start, it's a 12-month process for me.
You know what I think is interesting? Last year, everybody was like, oh, there's only even 500 guys eligible for this draft. There's usually a lot more than that. But all these guys are taking the COVID year. They're grad transferring. Wait till next year's draft. Well, now it's next year's draft. And now I'm reading people say, well, Aiden Hutchinson's probably the number one overall guy, but he wouldn't even been top 10 last year. So no. Which one is it? Emory, I'll start with you. Which one is it? Because everybody's like, oh, next year's, and now we're here. It's next year now. And now you're saying that the guy that might go number one wouldn't have even gone top 10 last year?
Listen, what Chad and I tend to expose amongst the draft media and is how many people don't actually do work. So if you're saying one thing, you can't then talk out the other side of your mouth saying something else. Um, I feel like a lot of people that are interested in the draft, they're interested on a Saturday by Saturday basis. Because if you're saying that, then this year you should have double prospects graded. You should have a more in-depth knowledge of who's who and what's what and stacking. And if you're doing it the right way, then you can go back 5 years and say, oh, this guy would have been probably here or this guy would have been there. If someone is a top 10 player, that person is a top 10 player. So if you think Hutchinson is a top 5 guy this year, then damn sure he's going to be a top 10 guy in any draft. So, people have to really understand what they're saying, but a lot of people just are in it for it's all about vibes.
Well, let me ask you, Chad, is there a way to say, okay, the top is not as good in this draft, but there is more depth. There is is there a way to marry those statements that those people are saying?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's a little bit of both. So, Aiden Hutchinson, when I did my Senior Bowl rankings, he was number 2. Malik Willis is number 1. Aiden Hutchinson was number 2. That
Malik
was before
Willis
the season.
Number 1?
Yes, before the season started.
No wonder you and Emory love each other so much. Oh my God! Now I know this is a Malik Willis thing.
Yeah. Well, I had to drop Malik a little bit after he threw like 3 interceptions 3 games in a row because you can't make those kind of decisions. But tools-wise, the guy's fantastic. But so Aiden Hutchinson was already at the top of the draft, so there's no question about that.
I love, by the way, Chad, your Senior Bowl. I read that all the time.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It is both. So a lot of the guys that decided to come back for this year were not top 100 guys. They were day 3 guys or guys that weren't going to get drafted anyway. So they decided just to come back, right? And you had some exceptions. There were probably 10 guys that would have been day 2 picks that decided to come back anyway because they want to try to make themselves first-round picks. Jaquan Brisker from Penn State's perfect example. There's some other guys that are listed there too. So I figure there was 250 guys on the Senior Bowl watch list last year, and I think 50 some of them returned to school. So it's a little bit of both. A lot of the top guys came out anyway, and the thing is that there are so many underclassmen that are taken early in the draft now that it really, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter, but they carry the draft in a lot of ways. So, even if a lot of these seniors returned, it didn't really affect the top of the draft as much. Now, we're going to see that change a little bit this year because some of those guys decided to return. The seniors will be a little more, they'll populate the top 100 a little bit more than last year. Last year was sort of a down year because of the COVID, but it will return back to normal a little bit this year.
And you know what else tends to trip people up? I think people grade in terms of round. If you eliminate round grades and just grade the player, then you're confident in your evaluation. So, for instance, let's say when I had Lamar Jackson was the number 1 quarterback, right? And I had a top 5 grade on him or whatnot. So I think it was a 90. I had a 90 grade on him. So I don't care where he goes and where he's ended up being picked. I'm relying mainly on my evaluation saying that he's an all-pro talent, So I think some people try to grade to say, oh, this guy will be a first-round pick. And you really can't control that. All I need to know is, did I nail the evaluation? And so therefore, when I say if I have a top 10 grade on somebody and he goes in the 5th round and people say, oh, you had a top 10 grade on him, he went in the 5th round, 3 years, prime example, I had a 4th round rated grade on Carson Wentz. People flame me for that. He went top 2. Fast forward to now, looks like I was right on my evaluation. So if you focus on the evaluation and not where someone can go, because we know things influence where guys can go, and people have to go where they go, but if you're getting the evaluation right, then you can say, okay, yeah, this guy's a top 10 talent based off his strengths and weaknesses. Otherwise, you're playing a guessing game that you're going to always end up losing.
Chad, I got good. Oh, go ahead. I got good news and bad news for you, Chad.
Yeah.
The bad news is like we're going to wrap up the show now. The good news is, well, maybe this might be bad news. You're coming on again, bro. Like, you are coming on again. This was awesome. This is exactly what I was hoping it would be. Chad is awesome on social media. A lot of times he'll reply to my food or beer tweets, which I love. He's a good evaluator of my beer and food as well. Make sure you check. This guy is the man behind the scenes. This guy is honestly, he is really the Emory Hunt of NFL media. That's how I would describe it. Of actually, NFL.com. Obviously, Emory does a million different things with CBS, HQ, and everything he does, which reminds me, I don't think I said it earlier, footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. Saw a couple people tweet at us last week showing their order. I love it. Keep them coming. We love seeing those. Footballgameplan.com/2022 draft guide. Follow him on Twitter at FBallGamePlan. Follow Chad. He's a stud at Chad_Reuter, Reuter. Other than that, the keg is kicked. We are all tapped out.
Thanks for listening to the College Draft Podcast. Make sure to also subscribe to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, Even Money, and The Business of Sports. All available at Apple Podcasts, rosstucker.com, or wherever podcasts can be found.
A lot of times on the show, I mentioned DraftKings. Here's what you need to know. You got to be 21 or older, New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. By the way, if what I was talking about included a deposit bonus, doesn't always, sometimes it does. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough, and deposit bonuses are paid out in site credit.